All right, everyone. We are live here. I want to say hello and thank you very much for joining our candidate forum on climate and community. With our candidates from the candidates for the House of Representatives for District 67A. My name is Chelsea DeArmond, and I'm the founder of St. Paul 350. This forum is co-hosted by St. Paul 350 and Eastside Freedom Library. And our goals for the forum include engaging Eastsiders in the importance of climate change and empowering us to take action, and also strengthening local democracy and solidarity in this time of physical distancing by offering an opportunity to hear from our candidates. It's our practice at both St. Paul 350 and the Eastside Freedom Library to offer a land acknowledgement at our events to inspire awareness and action. So I want to thank Dakota Eastsider Rebecca Nelson for leading us in this tonight. Rebecca works for the Eastside Elders and serves on the community councils for districts 4 and 5. From small businesses to unsheltered youth, Rebecca offers her support and advocacy in too many ways to name. So we're very grateful to have her here tonight to help us start the forum in a good way.
Thank you. Greetings to you all. My name is Rebecca, and I am Dakota from Assisitan Wahpeton Oyate in South Dakota. Welcome. I am burning sage to cleanse and purify this event and to bring positivity to the debate. I will offer tobacco later to honor and recognize the trees, the spirits, and the land that we are on. Because you are on stolen land. You need to collectively acknowledge that you are located and living on land that is on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of Indigenous people. Land that was taken through dishonest treaties and promises that were not true and ultimately broken. The word land for Native peoples is different than the way you think of land. When we talk about land, it is a part of who we are, a mixture of our blood, our past, our current, and our future. We carry our ancestors in us and around us. This land holds great historical, spiritual, and personal significance for its original stewards, the Native nations and the peoples of this region. Recognize this and continually support and advocate for the sovereignty of the Native nations in this territory and beyond, because we are still here. We are protectors of the water and the land, including sacred sites like Wakantipi and the Indian Mounds, and by recognizing the broken treaties in the fight over the Enbridge Line 3 on lands which we are continuing to fight to protect. By offering this land acknowledgement, you affirm tribal sovereignty and will work to hold this community accountable to American Indian peoples and nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. So before we get started with the candidates, I would like to say a little bit about St. Paul 350. We are a grassroots organization of neighbors who are committed to ending the fossil fuel pollution that is damaging St. Paul communities and our climate. We're committed to speeding the transition to clean energy and to creating a just and healthy future for all of us. And I want to let you know about a very quick action that you can take that can make a big difference. A lot of people don't believe they can make a difference when it comes to climate change because it's just too big. But did you know that the city of St. Paul is one of Xcel Energy's biggest customers? Right now, Xcel is proposing a resource plan that will include new fracked gas power, but we have a chance to change this. If we come together as a city and tell Xcel that St. Paul stands for 100% clean, renewable power. We don't want any of the money we pay on our utility bills to go toward the new fossil fuel infrastructure, because we know the harm it's causing our communities and our climate. One way St. Paul is sending this message is by using a labor organizing technique of collecting pledge cards. We gathered hundreds of cards before social distancing was implemented, and maybe some of you signed these, and for that we thank you. But right now we're going digital, and we want to get thousands more signatures on our website, which is sp350.org, and we're going to post a link in the comments. So you just click that link and you just sign your name saying, yes, I stand for 100% clean energy. And we will make sure that message gets sent to our city leaders and to our utility. Because we know that if we come together as a city and influence Xcel Energy to change its resource plan, it doesn't just affect us in St. Paul, it affects 3.3 million other customers in 8 states. And Xcel is a leader in the nation among other utilities, so they will follow Xcel's example. So that's just one really quick thing. It's an example of what we do at St. Paul 350. And this forum is another example of things that we try to do. We believe in democracy and we believe in connecting as a city. And we're really excited to be able to give you an opportunity to get to know these 2 great candidates better. So thanks for being here. And I'm handing it over to Clarence with the Eastside Freedom Library.
Thank you, Chelsea. I'm Clarence White. I'm the Associate Director at the Eastside Freedom Library. We are thrilled to be hosting this event. I'm here by myself inside the library, as you may be able to tell. Over 20,000 books here that contain a lot of knowledge, but we like to think of this space as to create and share knowledge, especially those bits of knowledge that haven't been through or welcomed through the doors of publishing or academia. We are curating a lot of stories, a lot of voices, and a lot of people have shared their knowledge, their ideas here. We are continuing to have events even as we are social distancing or physical distancing, and the narratives that are being told at this time and previous times need to contain a lot more voices. So we encourage you not only to engage in this conversation, but also in the other conversations that we have and other neighbors here on the East Side and across our region are having. So thank you for joining us. Welcome. With that, I am going to invite our 2 candidates, Hoang Murphy and John Thompson, to give brief opening statements. We have allotted 4 minutes for that. And I am really looking forward to hearing from them and the future of St. Paul that both of these candidates are helping to shape. So I believe we are starting with John. So John, if you want to jump in and give us your 4 minutes.
I'm unmuting. Hello, guys. My name is John Thompson. I am your candidate here and representing District 67A. And a little bit about myself. I'm an East Sider. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a former union member with IAM 77. I was a machinist for 11 years. I've dedicated my entire life to fighting for justice and equality throughout the state of Minnesota. And so now I'm just planning to take that same passion that was on the other side of the bullhorn straight to the state capitol with me. But to talk about environmental justice issues facing East Siders here is what I wanted to talk about today, because areas of concentrated poverty in St. Paul, we can't forget to have this conversation. That some of the highest lead levels amongst children in the state of Minnesota bubbling up right here on the East Side. You know, Ramsey County has some of the worst air pollution in this state. And so I want to make sure that we have that conversation today. And I want to definitely make sure that we talk about how this COVID-19 is disparately impacting African Americans and communities of color due to underlying health problems that we already had, like emphysema, high blood pressure, heart attacks, diabetes. These were things that we had already. So we really can't afford to be affected by this coronavirus. But I just wanted to let you know that these are some of the reasons why I partnered with organizations like Minnesota and St. Paul 350. This is because they're a local group working at, you know, the neighborhood level. and reaching out to people like me who normally don't feel included in these high-level scientific discussions. Reality is the climate on the East Side is our children are dodging bullets. Our parents are trying to figure out where the next meal's coming from, right? Our parents are trying to figure out if they lift this eviction thing here, that they're going to be an eviction court. So the climate on the East Side, we have a whole lot of other underlying issues affecting us, which affects our mental health, our physical health. And so we can't afford to be a part of this pandemic, because when the pandemic is over here in this state, Black people and brown people are still going to be in an epidemic state. And so I thank you guys for inviting me, because this issue really, really, really affects my community. And I'm really, really, really passionate about it. I didn't get into climate justice work until a good friend of mine, Ed Owens from the NAACP St. Paul, actually brought me in. And we were interested in bringing jobs with this new renewable energy push to my community, because we always get left out. And so I'm definitely grateful that you guys brought me in here for this conversation. I look forward to the richness of this conversation, and I'll use my time and give it to, I'm done here. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, John.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. This is Hoang Murphy. I'm just going to jump right in. So I just want to say thank you so much to St. Paul 350 and Minnesota 350 for, and the Eastside Freedom Library for hosting this event. And I so appreciate your patience, as it was rescheduled from March to just this Monday and rescheduled again to this Thursday. Appreciate the tenacity in which you all had to make sure this is happening and to make sure that voices get heard here on the East Side. So I want to thank you for that. And thank you for everyone listening and watching for tuning in. I really appreciate that you all are listening and that you all are so engaged on economic issues and environmental issues here on the East Side. And I'd just love for a couple of minutes just to let you know a little bit about myself and why I'm running. So once again, my name's Hoang Murphy, and I'm a lifelong Minnesotan. I'm the son of immigrants who fled Vietnam for a better life. I'm also the son of white working class folks from northern Minnesota who strive for better. And I'm a proud son of the East Side. And I'm running to represent all of us in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And I've devoted my entire life to fighting for children and families. And for me, that fight began when I was 8 years old and I attended school for the very first time. When I say the first time, I mean like my first time in a school ever. I was 8 and it saved my life because a public school teacher saw me and saw that I was a kid that was in danger. And that triggered the systems in place to protect children like me. That moment changed my trajectory. I entered foster care. I went on to graduate high school and was the first in my family to go to college. I was lucky enough to attend Syracuse University, where I got to study public policy, and Johns Hopkins, where I got my master's in education. And that was when I knew it was my time to pay it forward. And so I became a public school teacher. I taught high school English, and I loved it. Teaching my kids the importance of reading and writing was the greatest honor of my life. And if I could, I would still be in the classroom. But just as the school year ended in 2016, one of my students became a victim of gun violence. And when I was in the hospital, I just asked myself, what is the point of teaching if my students weren't even able to survive? If a system was so indifferent to their lives, what could I do? So I left. I left the classroom and I set out to change the systems that allowed this to happen. And that brought me to the US Department of Education, where I had the honor of serving as a policy advisor to then Secretary King in the last year of the Obama White House. There I was able to fight for better outcomes for our kids, more resources for our homeless and foster youth, and more leadership opportunities for our teachers. And I moved back home to Minnesota on the East Side after the 2016 elections to defend my communities, the communities that raised me from the harmful policies I knew that were coming from Washington. And so I founded an organization, a nonprofit called Foster Advocates, to make sure that those most impacted by systems of oppression are at the table when it comes to deciding what that pain point is and crafting the solutions to them. And we all have a responsibility to end these systems of inequity. And the only way to do that is long-term investment in our community. And so my priorities for the East Side are increased business growth. It is unacceptable to me that nearly 43,000 people live in this community and there are only 2,200 jobs on the greater East Side. This must change. Additionally, here on the East Side, we receive way less than our fair share. We are a third of this city and we only get 1/5 of the investment That must change. It is my deep belief that policy should be crafted by the people those policies affect most. I'm running on a platform of people-powered grassroots democracy. And I will always stand up for our unions. I work the factory line as a member of the Baker, Confectionery, and Grain Millers International Union. And I also had the honor of being a union member as a member of the American Federation of Teachers. My wife teaches kindergarten right here in the district at the Heights Community School and is the union steward for the St. Paul Federation of Educators. And I'm running, but I need your help. So if you feel like I do that Eastside needs a strong champion at the state capitol, then I need you to volunteer. And together, I know that we can build real political power here in the Eastside. Together, we can build a state in which every kid succeeds. And so the Eastside saved my life, and I have a debt to my community. And serving as your next state rep is a small way I hope to repay it. So thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mike Karabayashi, and I'll be co-moderating this forum along with Clarence. And I'll also be acting as timekeeper. I'm a member of St. Paul 350 and a delegated of 67A. Now, for the first question to ask you guys, how does climate change affect our Eastside communities? And if unchecked, how will climate change affect our community in the future?
I get the first one.
Yep.
Is it me here? Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
go ahead, John.
Okay. So listen, what we know, right, is that people who live in concentrated areas of poverty are much more deeply impacted by climate change due to lack of resources. I just so happen to be in this area right here, and actually I am one of them. And so, like, I know the city's action resiliency plan shows a map of the city's neighborhoods paying the highest heating bill, which lines up with St. Paul's area of concentrated poverty, right where I live. And people who live in lower rent, substandard housing are likely dealing with insufficient heating systems and homes that are inadequately insulated and old and drafty windows. And you can't tell me that when I turn my faucet on, that brown stuff that's coming out of my faucet is good water for me to drink, right? And that's because the water's coming in from the city is good water. I mean, the actually St. Paul Federation, the Water Federation actually had won awards. But when you go inside of these houses, I do plumbing, right? When you go inside of these houses, you see some of the old piping inside of these houses that's bringing water to these faucets, and you check the spigots and the aerators, and you see all of the crap that's coming out of the faucet. You can't tell me that we're not drinking lead. St. Paul Public Schools has some of the highest lead levels, like, compared to Flint, Michigan. Do the research. So when we talk about areas of concentrated poverty, these are areas that I live in and my family live in. And that's why I say that climate change issues and climate issues are very important to me in my community. But we have so many other things that we have to deal with, which is not like the number one thing on our plate. Truth is, the climate we live in, the schools are underfunded. The park districts don't have funding so the kids can have somewhere to go. That's the climate that we live in. And I'm going to reiterate that because I want to make sure that we get some meat on the plate when we're talking about issues that affect my community. The climate is my kids are running around dodging bullets here in the city of St. Paul. That's the climate. But we can get back to that. I just wanted to finish that question and get back. So go ahead.
Thank you. And Hoang?
Yeah, so just I think it's a great question, right? How does the climate change affect Eastside communities? And what can we do about it, especially if it's not addressed? And one thing I want to make super clear is that it's often said that certain communities don't care about climate change, and I'm here to say that that's untrue. The Eastside cares deeply about climate change because it's going to impact us the most. We are a frontline community when it comes to the climate crisis. We know who bears the cost of systemic failures. We know who's being hurt most when it comes to the global pandemic. It's communities like ours, low-income communities, communities facing significant challenges, and communities that are hurting now are going to be the same ones that are hurting when climate change starts to make real substantial changes, something that we're already feeling here on the east side of St. Paul. Last winter, we had more snow emergencies than we had in any other year, and we're seeing that becoming more likely. We're also seeing then that effect on our roads and in all other systems. And when it comes to green space and access to air quality, the east side happens to have the worst air quality of any part of the district. And so I want to be clear that climate change is an issue that will devastate our entire planet, but it'll also devastate the east side if going unchecked. And so I want to use my experience as a teacher and as an educator to hold town halls, hold educational forums, to work to inform our community about these impacts and how we're going to feel them in the short and long term. And also, like, I want us to make sure that, for us to act, we first must understand like what change this is going to happen here on the East Side, that climate change is coming for us, that there are systems that we need to check. And so some of these ways that we can address this is that the reason why we have such bad air pollution is because, like I said in my opening remarks, is that we have 43,000 people for 2,200 jobs on the greater East Side. That means most of us are commuting for work. That means we're traveling elsewhere, which means that we're riding fossil fuel run buses that create more air pollution for our district. Communities in which they get to work and live in their communities, or that are walkable, or that you can bike to, have cleaner air quality. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why poverty is a hot map for pollution. And it's this very reason. It's also why, industrial pollutants like industry jobs that, that burn scrap metal and, produce toxins are built in communities that are less civically engaged. How we address that and how we challenge that is to change the civic engagement here on the East Side as well. And so right now, the East Side is the lowest voter turnout community. That must change. Regardless of who wins this race, it will be a failure if that candidate does not achieve historic voter turnout. That is how we keep Minnesota blue. It's how we push green and blue policies at the state legislature and statewide. We hold statewide candidates accountable to those changes so that we can go to the governor and say, hey, here on the East Side, we're suffering from the impacts of climate change. This is not a time to be waffling. When the governor made a commitment to stop Line 3, then he needs to honor that. He needs to address that. And we need to make sure then that there's sovereignty for tribal communities that want to go back to their ancestral homes to other parts of the state of Minnesota and know that those lands are still there, that they're free of toxins, and that they can continue to be great stewards for their ancestral homes. Those are things that we must address here on the East Side. We have an incredible opportunity to do that. I'm so proud of folks from the East Side that have been tackling this issue. One thing that I think we can also address here on the East Side is urban agriculture. We have a deep opportunity here on the East Side to bring jobs and also make sure that we have sustainable growth here. We can do aquaculture. We can grow shrimp on the East Side. We can make sure that we have mushroom plants, and there's industries that are already doing this. And we should bring them to the East Side. We should, at the state legislature, we should push for programs that allow and encourage businesses to come to places like the East Side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our next question, Candidate Murphy, you can start this time. What are some ways in which climate change relates to other issues that we're facing right now, especially as we're dealing with the coronavirus crisis? And what will you do to address those issues?
Yeah, I think that that's an incredible question and a really timely question, right? I really think that, the coronavirus is causing certain medical emergencies, right, in a global pandemic, but it's also revealing the inequities and issues of the status quo. And it's really addressing, and showing in sharp relief all the other systems, right? Poverty is only going to get worse under a global pandemic. Questions of disparities are only going to get worse in a global pandemic. And also, these global pandemics are going to only happen more often and are going to be more likely if we don't do something around the environment. If we clear forests, if we clear green growth, as the world warms and permafrost melts, more issues will be revealed. That's something that we're seeing across the globe, and why we're seeing hot areas across the country and across the world where disease pops up. These things are not new. They're just hidden in spaces that we really, frankly, shouldn't be invading, and humans shouldn't be, destroying those ecosystems, because that has a blowback, and that blowback is things like COVID-19. And part of that, I think that we have to address it in larger context, is that, I firmly believe in this idea of not just simply environmentalism, but environmental justice. That, I think trees are great, but you shouldn't just hug a tree and not care about the people who live among them. And I think that in part of that, by protecting people who have been good stewards of land before, then you are protecting the forests and the areas in which they live on. And one of those clear ways is around universal coverage around healthcare, right? We are only as safe as our least safe neighbor. That's what this pandemic is showing to us and is revealing to us, that we are only as protected as our neighbor that is most vulnerable, by making sure that everyone doesn't have to worry about their health coverage. I will be healthier if I know that my neighbor doesn't have to avoid going to the doctor. And also increased economic security. Right now, what we're seeing due to children being at home and not having access to internet is we're seeing an incredible increase in child welfare investigations because they're taking this thing called educational neglect when you're truant from school. That's something I'm doing in my org. I'm fighting to make sure that that waiver gets changed, because that's not fair to kids in poverty, that their parenting is being questioned simply because they don't have access to internet. That must change, and we have to find solutions to that. But also, I really do want to take a moment and speak about solidarity here on the East Side and solidarity in general, that we're only as strong as we stand with each other, and we stand, aside our queer brothers and sisters and other people of color. And I have to address the fact that, that the mailer was sent out recently by the other candidate in this race, celebrating and embracing the support of former council member Basuri, who has been accused of extremely homophobic remarks, saying that we should celebrate killing gay people. It is one thing that Basuri supports Thompson, but it's an altogether completely more offensive to LGBTQ and folks who are seeking queer liberation, who are at the margins of so many different systems, that John chooses to celebrate this fact and give this person a platform and to celebrate him. I think that that's toxic. This is a person that was condemned by the city council, condemned by Stonewall DFL, condemned by Outfront Minnesota, and this person was condemned by John's campaign manager, Nelsie Yang, who now both John and her are celebrating this supporter and celebrating the misogyny and the homophobia that this person represents. If you stand with homophobes, guess what? You're a homophobe. And we shouldn't tolerate that. We can't speak about solidarity and forget some of our neighbors. We can't fight for justice and not stand for the justice of our friends.
Yeah, are we having a forum or are we attacking campaigns here today? But I want to answer the question. Please, can you give me the question? Because I run a campaign where I attack the problems and not the people. And I definitely want to address the problem that we're here to address today. And that's the 350 candidate forum on climate justice. And I don't think that this is a platform to use to try to slander anybody's campaign. So I want to keep moving forward. And can you please, with all due respect, give me the question? And so, because I didn't even remember the question because I'm hearing something totally off track. So can we go back to the question, please? Thank you, with all due respect.
I can repeat the question. What are some ways in which climate change relates to other issues that we're facing right now, especially in this time when we're facing a coronavirus crisis? And what will you do to address those issues?
What I've learned about the coronavirus here is that we were in a pandemic before the pandemic even started, right? We had a virus before the virus even started. And I mean with diabetes, the high cost of insulin, right? The way that the high cost of medications is set up. We were the ones who were applying for medical assistance and we couldn't even weave through the red tape to get medical assistance. What I'm learning about the coronavirus now is we were fighting to try to feed our kids so that they wouldn't be lunch shamed in the lunchrooms. And now not only are we feeding our kids for free, but we're delivering food to their doorsteps. That's what I learned about the coronavirus and how money that we say we didn't have, we all of a sudden have, right? And so when we talk about renewable energy sources coming to our area, when we talk about stuff like that, I want to make sure that we're not left out of the pie that's going to come with this huge pot of money. When we talk about retrofitting our schools and our churches with alternative solar energy, I want to make sure that Black and brown people aren't left out of those training facilities being built in our community and not left out of access to getting to those training facilities when we get them in our community. And I want to make sure that they have ownership in the doggone energy that we are putting in our community. It's time to cut us in or cut it out. Because at the end of the day, right now, we were already in a pandemic an epidemic before coronavirus, and it's gonna hit us even worse. Like I said earlier, we're the ones who are living check to check. Some of us making $1,400 every 2 weeks, and our rent's $750 an hour. So that's the climate that my people, Black and brown and indigenous people, live in. And so I know how coronavirus is gonna hurt my community. It's killing Black folks right now at a high rate, at a high rate. The desperate impact of COVID-19 on African Americans in my community and in communities of color. You know, I thank St. Paul 350, and I hope they join me in raising these public health realities about climate change, environmental issues that are real. I mean, the history of the East Side include what many feel as a glorious history of manufacturing. It was the birthplace of 3M, but East Siders likely suffer from higher rates of cancer because of Scotch tape. You know, the closer you live to a gas station, the closer the closer you are to catching cancer because of the benzene that comes out of the gas, the emission, like honestly. So when we talk about how it's affecting communities of color, here I am, a man of color. I stand in solidarity with everybody. I've marched, I've been the loudest voice, and how dare you attack me? I've been the loudest voice in this state for everybody, across race, gender, age. I don't care. I stood up for Justine Demond. So I know what I am and who I am. I don't have to defend myself. I know what I do and how I do it. I don't have to defend myself. And I think that that was very, very unprofessional and tacky for someone to attack who supports my campaign. I think that was very unprofessional and tacky, and voters should actually take a look at the man. Judge what they say. Judge what they say. Don't just judge what they say they're gonna do. Judge what they say. Judge me by what I do. I've been boots on the ground for day one. I lost my best friend in this state with a 4-year-old girl in the backseat of the car. If it wasn't for my friend getting murdered, I'd still be working as a machinist. I've dedicated my life to fighting for justice and equality for everybody, regardless if they're what race, creed, age, I don't care who it is. Hurt hurts, no matter who is the person on the delivering end of the hurt, the person that receives the hurt is hurt the same way you get hurt. Hurt hurts no matter who it is. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. What are some examples of climate change legislation that you would support, and what legislation would you oppose?
Yeah, and right before we jump into the question, I just want to say, you know, John, you can clear this up very easily by condemning Basuri. You can condemn him and condemn his remarks right now and resolve this issue.
I think the question is my question now. I think I get to answer this question first, right?
Don't take over my time. I let you speak.
I get to answer this question first, right? This is my
same amount of time that I give to you, and that the forum has.
Hold on a second. We'll give.
Yeah.
The question going to Mr. Hoang Murphy. Because
wait,
John, I gave you the respect by giving you your time. I'm going to ask that
gentlemen, let us talk.
Who's the question going to?
No, gentlemen, let us talk. Mike is managing the time. He has taken considerations into account, and you'll have to trust us to do that. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. So, Mike, go ahead. And it is John's opportunity to answer this question first.
It's actually my opportunity.
Was it? No, we switch alternate. So
Just a good meeting.
First question first, or well, yeah, we go back and forth with who answers the question first. So is that what you have, Mike?
Yep, that's true. So they're so since we have two alternate candidates, we're alternating who's going first, and that means whoever answers the question last is also going to be answering the next question first.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Sure. Go ahead.
So is it my turn to answer this third question?
That's right.
Mike, can you please repeat the question?
Sure thing. Just a second. Let me just reset this. All right. Great. What are some examples of climate change legislation that you would support, and what legislation would you oppose?
You know, St. Paul 350 has been working to set up like solar cooperatives with St. Paul schools. Like, I remember I worked as a machinist for the district over at 1930. So I'm familiar with the fight it is to get solar energy on top of those rules, right? But it was a way of giving residents a means of investing in alternative energy and providing students at heart an opportunity to actively study the value of renewable energy and models for commitment and community investment. And it has been like hard to get the district to actually engage and work with the group, that they continue to work hard on this. So what I love about the idea is that regular people like you and me can effectively switch over the energy that we're paying from whatever Excel wants it to be to renewable energy, And so I supported that, and I support the CLEAR bill. I also supported a bill that didn't come from the state level, but it came from the federal. Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio supported this bill that would bring millions of dollars here to actually retrofit our schools and our churches and our businesses with alternative energy sources, renewable energy sources. What I don't want us to forget is the Black and brown people that comes with that money as far as training and jobs. If you give a man an opportunity to make $60,000 a year, I'm telling you, crime would drop in my community. And when you bring that renewable energy and those jobs that come with it, because this is jobs that's coming to the future, it's gonna take somebody to know how to repair that faucet, that when you put your hands right up under it, the water comes on and you can wash your hands. It's gonna take somebody to learn how to do that. When you put your hands right up under the toilet paper dispenser and you can dry your hands, somebody needs to learn how to repair that. And I hope they don't leave us out. So I really support that also. There's a couple of bills, man, that I'm just looking at, man, like this disinvestment in missing and murdered Indigenous women task force. I want to definitely tap into that, but I also want to reach out to organizations like Minnesota 350 and ask you about bills that you think are coming up the pipeline. I want to partner with organizations like Minnesota 350 and St. Paul 350 also to definitely talk about and have honest conversations about climate change, climate issues, renewable energy. Like, I'm not the smartest one when it comes to all this stuff, but I know I can reach out to some of the leaders and some of the experts on this. And I'm talking about the boots on the ground organizations. Definitely I can reach out to them. I've always been a walking magnet, so I attract good people, good energy, and for the 12% that actually don't want to work on this issue, let them uninvite themselves to the table. But when it comes to making sense for my community, I'm 100% all on board, boots on the ground, no matter what. These are a lot of things that I want to help champion here. We have to actually put together a legislative agenda when it comes to renewable energy that's going to make sense not only for one community, but all of us. And I definitely want Minnesota to be first, not worse, when it comes to doing this. And I know we can do it. I know we can do it. We're seeing a lot of things that we thought we couldn't do that were way too left that's happening right now. Why does it take an epidemic or a pandemic for us to get there? Let's get there now. We shouldn't have to wait to 2050 to get renewable energy, right? There's certain things that we can do now. I definitely don't want to keep asking them to not dig across indigenous land, right? So those are things that I definitely want to not do, but I definitely want to support things that make sense for my community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. As a follow-up, we are going to do some follow-ups for some of these questions. The predecessor that you'd be replacing, Tim Mahoney, has introduced at times legislation to criminalize protests of fossil fuel lines and for the so-called iterations of the guilt by association bills. What are your stances on these?
You talking to me?
Yep. Yeah, we've got budget time for some follow-ups. And we're going to do them on some of these questions.
Can you ask that question again? Because I didn't hear the entirety of the question.
Sure. So the predecessor who you'd be replacing, Tim Mahoney, had supported and proposed some bills that would criminalize the protests of fossil fuel lines, and also I don't know if you've heard of the so-called guilt by association bills, where if you were associated with people who had been arrested, you would also be found liable. What are your positions on these?
Funny you asked that. A few years ago in 2016, Nick Zerwas proposed a bill similar to that. We call it the anti-protest bill. You can Google this information and you'll see the response I gave to Nick Zerwas. Let me be clear when I say this. There's some legislation that comes up the pipeline that has Donald Trump's playbook written all over it. I oppose any bills that don't make sense for my community. And I oppose any bill that will infringe on my right to stand in solidarity with my brothers and sisters who are asking for us to not harm our community, but help our community. So that's my stance on that. I oppose any, and how dare you infringe on my right to speak up? Listen, and here's my honest opinion on issues like that. We have to organize, strategize, and mobilize to fight against oppression, racism, discrimination, and even fighting against each other. Like, I love y'all, man, and I'm talking to complete strangers. I love y'all. I love my community. And so I oppose anything that would infringe on my rights. Because a lot of times, guess what? It's just us asking for justice, just us. And you would think that we know exactly what it is that we need in our communities because we live in them every day. That's just like telling the teachers that they don't know what they're talking about when they're in the classrooms with the teachers every day. They have to know something, right? Let's do things that make sense for our community. We can't keep fighting each other. We got a problem out here. Let's attack the problem, not the people. People mess up. People make mistakes. But let's attack the problem. The problem is they're pushing policy at the Capitol that harms my community, and then they fall back to Elk River. Then they fall back to Two Harbors, Minnesota, Virginia, Minnesota, and look at us with our boots on the ground. You know, look at those protesters out there. We wouldn't be protesting if you didn't give us a reason to. If you want us to stop protesting, sir, stop giving us a reason to protest, please. Because until then, I'll be there with my brothers and sisters with my boots on the ground. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hoang, just to remind for the question, what are some examples of climate change legislation that you would support, and what legislation would you oppose?
Yeah, thank you for the question. You know, I think this is a fundamental one, right? This speaks to the work that we are hoping to do as representatives at the state capitol. And, you know, it's something that is deeply known here on the East Side and, you know, in so many other places, is that too often working class folks of all ethnicities, but especially Indigenous and people of color, are the ones who bear the impacts of the dirty air that hurts our health. And, you know, as we record hours for far too little dollars. And so we must ensure that a transition to a clean energy economy does not increase the cost of living, does not increase those inequities, while also ensuring that these communities and our communities are actively shaping future clean energy policy and reaping the benefits of the transition in jobs, in pay and air quality and overall health, that we can't be left behind, that the most marginalized communities must be part of this plan. And I think one of the clearest ways and the simplest ways that I hope to address it is I hope to be a champion for a Minnesota Green New Deal. And you know, any Green New Deal should look different for every state. And the one that I really think would work for the state of Minnesota is, you know, an adjustment around, you know, reducing carbon pollution. And the clear way that we can start that is, you know, I support making sure and making certain that the state of Minnesota is net zero, is carbon neutral by 2050, in support of, you know, so many other environmental plans, and in line with the Paris Climate Accord. But, you know, I also want to be clear that Minnesota cannot stand by itself. Something that the global pandemic that is teaching us is that pollution, just like viruses and just like disease, crosses borders. And so I would support and I would lobby our federal representatives and senators and our governor to make sure that every region can fight for climate change together. We have seen a rollback of environmental protections from Washington. And so if Washington won't lead, then guess what? Minnesota will, and I will be part of that. I think that, you know, Governor Walz showed a roadmap for us by joining the pandemic response with so many other states that are led by governors that are from the Democratic Party. I would like Minnesota to be part of the Midwestern Climate Compact, similar to the regional greenhouse gas initiative in northeastern parts of the state, so that, you know, we can address this together. Because I think the best answer for addressing this is that, you know, we make progress together and that the region moves forward together. So we also don't lose jobs in this transition. I also want to make sure that, you know, we address the green banking, that, you know, so many other states like Connecticut, New York have created green banks that aim to increase like the adoption of clean energy and energy efficiency loans to all folks by lowering the cost of capital loans. We know that it's our communities, people of color, indigenous communities, that have harder access to getting loans. Green banks could address this and allows for folks to invest in green industry that's both financially sustainable equitable, and environmentally friendly. And I also think that we should really make adjustments around dislocation, that working communities like the East Side face dislocation as a result of energy transition. That if this does happen, and then we are given financial resources to compensate for that this transition to new employment, if we're getting rid of sectors that are producing environmental toxins, that we then catch the people that are being left off that map by giving them green jobs, by teaching folks that maybe used to be miners to be technicians around windmills. And then lastly, I would like to see a form of reparations or a green dividend, if you will. And so I think the state should consider a rebate check, a reparations check to citizens from frontline communities like ours, from any state savings or any monies made from the investment of this green bank to support our communities in this transition and to make up for the regressive impact of the past. We have harmed certain communities, and we can rectify this in a Minnesota Green New Deal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, I'll ask the same question. The person you'd be replacing in the House has both supported and has proposed bills that would criminalize protesting of fossil fuel or protests against fossil fuels, and also the so-called guilt by association laws, where if you were associated with someone who had been arrested, that you would then also be liable. What is your position on that?
Yeah, I want to be incredibly clear here, that our right to protest is enshrined in the First Amendment, and I will protect that right. The fact that people have been shown across the state who have been protesting for the right to survive, the right to be recognized, the right to not have their sovereignty infringed on, those are rights that I will protect. I will oppose any legislation that limits our freedoms by limiting our ability to speak out freely, to move in the spirit of protest when we don't see that something is correct or fair, and to protect sovereignty of Native nations who are protesting the fact that oil pipelines are infringing on their native lands, lands entrusted them in treaty that the state of Minnesota and the US government has violated frequently and far too long. I would like to see an expansion of that in return in honoring those treaties and recognizing them. And I want to be, also just like even more clear that, there are populations that have always been good stewards of this land. We have shown that humanity doesn't need to be in conflict to the environment. We're seeing in Los Angeles right now, among large cities, they're the cleanest. They have the cleanest air quality among large cities of any city in the globe. We need to find ways to return to that idea that humans can live in harmony with our environment, that we can grow our economy while also doing things that protect the environment. But we don't do that by building oil pipelines. We don't do that by investing in fossil fuels. And we don't do that by harming the communities that have shown that they are capable of sharing. And we should take lessons from those communities and saying, they learn to live in accordance with tribal lands. It is white supremacy that has shown us a wrong path, or one that is an economy based on extraction, not on celebration of sharing and solidarity. That's the economy I would like to move to. And that is the movement that I think we should celebrate and we should build on. And I will oppose any legislation that limits that. And I will support anything that promotes that. So thank you.
Thank you, both of you. The next question relates to actually the job of being a legislator. I worked at the legislature for a bit earlier, and I know that most of the work doesn't happen giving speeches on the House floor or on the campaign trail, but it happens in conversations and meetings and through relationships. What we're wondering is, when you get to the legislature, what committees are you looking to be a part of? And also, what legislators do you plan to work with on the work of climate change?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is an incredible question. And, I would like to start with the second part first, is what legislators would I like to work with on environmental issues? Through my nonprofit, Foster Advocates, we bring people of experienced foster care to the Capitol, and we really try to promote, making sure that people who are closest to the pain are closest to the solution. And through that work, we were able to promote a policy this year that's likely going to pass that will actually hold accountable the state for foster care education outcomes. And so I'd love to work with the folks that supported that, like Representative Moran, who was a champion for our bill. I'd love to work with her. I'm a big fan of her work. Jamie Becker Finn, Rep, who I think has been showing that environmental stewardship can happen and should happen. Jamie Long, who's been an incredible champion for environmental rights issues. Kelly Moeller, who was a sponsor of that same legislation that I was talking about earlier. Loved working with her. She's an incredible champion. Would love and welcome continuing to work with her. Senators Eakin and Senators Kent, who Kent especially, who was one of our sponsors in the Senate for that legislation. I look forward to working with the minority leader and look forward to her serving as the majority leader shortly. And also just all of the St. Paul delegation, and just a special shout out for Representative Jay Zhang, who's a supporter of this campaign and I would love to work alongside the B side to make sure that we can fight for environmental justice here on the East side by having two champions of the environment at the state capitol. But just to address some of the committees, I would, as a former teacher, I would love to be on one of the ed committees, but I have a particular interest in serving the higher education finance committee. So that we can push for some policies that I would love to support. And one of those is free community and technical colleges and debt-free four-year universities. And eventually I would like those to be free as well. I would love to work in those communities to help fight for those things. I think that in 2008 we saw a huge uptick in folks going to school when the economy went south. We're going to see that happen again. A lot more folks are going to go to school. And what we should learn from 2008 is then we need to address affordability. And I would love to serve in that committee to address that. I'd also love to be in the jobs bill and build on the legacy of folks that have been serving there and address just the job disparity of the 43,000 people here who live in the district for only 2,200 jobs on the greater East Side. And finally, I think people are going to be surprised by this one, but I'd also love to serve on the agriculture committee. I think it's been ignored for far too long, and it's an opportunity to fight for climate change and build coalitions for better land stewardship. As a legislator, I would welcome the opportunity to serve on the agriculture committee. I think in this role, we can fight to preserve family farms, who often demonstrate better, environmental stewardship and ethical practice than corporate counterparts. Everything starts with where we eat. It's often said that once in a life you're going to need an attorney, but 3 times a day you're going to need a farmer. We should support the good ones. And so in the short term, I think that through the agriculture committee, we can also fight for financial incentives that support folks, like the aquaculture that I was talking about, that building on these wonderful farmers and who are doing the right thing amidst a really volatile food market. And that state should provide property tax credits for acreage under crop CRP, the crop reserve program, or excuse me, the conservation reserve program. And I really think that when we talk about affordability, we're also talking about food prices. When we live in food deserts, like we do here on the East Side, having someone on the agriculture committee could help solve those solutions. We can promote agriculture in the East Side. We can promote green growth. And one thing that I also want to address is I love that people buy organic and support those things, but what's really critically important is that you negate any environmental benefits if that organic turnip was shipped from California on a diesel truck. Was brought here from Mexico on a diesel truck. If we can grow things here, grow things locally, grow things down the street and support our local farmers, our Hmong farmers who have farmers markets across the district, then we have a better economy, and I hope to serve and support that. Thank you.
Oh, he does a good job of not answering your question. The question was, right, what was the question, Mike, again? Which legislators would I work with?
I think this was Clarence's one.
Yes. So, yes, which legislators you would work with and what committees you would like to be on.
Obvious committees for me, Clarence, is the with Carlos Mariani and Brother Jamil Lindy. I definitely want to work on what real criminal justice looks like from a criminal justice standpoint. Simply because if we look at Minnesota House File 609.605, the use of deadly force, right? That bill allows officers to kill my brothers and sisters and then say that they were in fear for their life. And so my telephone can look like a gun and kill my brothers and sisters. Now, I don't want to take that bill off the books, but I want to bring the conversation to the Capitol where we're looking at the wording in that bill. And I hope you're taking notes, Mr. Murphy. But to actually look at that bill and change the wording in that bill, which allows my brothers and sisters to be murdered, and then we don't even get a trial, right? I want to look at that. I also want to work on the finance committee, because I feel like our budget is a moral compass and we can put whatever we want to put in it. Don't tell me Minnesota can't have some of the best schools when it comes to renewable energy, the best businesses, the best churches, the best jobs for Black and brown people, the best training facilities. Don't tell me you don't have the money for it, because I see the money right now. And so I know that being on the finance committee, I can put some meat on their plate when it comes to conversations about how we cut the pie for my community. It just makes sense. Also want to be on the education committee, because it's a doggone shame that the achievement gap here in the state of Minnesota is the worst almost in the United States of America. Yo, I don't know if people understand this, but as a Black man, they used to beat my ancestors when they taught us how to, when they would get caught teaching us how to read and write. They would get hung up by a tree and beaten. Now they just call it an achievement gap. You know, anybody can straighten their hair out, you know, and say that, you know, I'm a person of color, but what color are you? If you can straighten your hair out and benefit from right privilege, then you're just the same as the white supremacists that are pushing issues here at the Capitol right now. And every 6 months, they have a racist agenda that comes to my community. It's called a legislative session. And every 6 months, my community gets left out. I'm here to change that. And so if you believe in implementing the people who are affected by the problems that we're trying to solve here in our community, vote for John Thompson for District 67A, because I'm for the people. I'm gonna continue to fight for the people, no matter who you are. I mean, I had a conversation with Hoang Murphy at the coffee shop, and he asked me why I was running. I told him I'm running for my people. And Hoang Murphy said, Mr. Thompson, you better be careful, because it's not all Black people in the East Side. And I said, Mr. Murphy, I'm talking about the lady that makes $752 every 2 weeks, and her rent's $1,400 a month. And she got 4 kids in a 3-bedroom apartment. And she just so happened to be a 47-year-old white St. Paul Public School teacher's assistant. So when you try to throw out there that John's not for the people, I'm for all people, everybody. My campaign is people over politics. And that's what I'm gonna put. And that's what I'm bringing to the Capitol. The people that have the same voice. And I'm gonna bring the same passion, the same fight, and the same thunder. So I hope they're ready for me at the state Capitol, because I will be your next legislator. You don't even need no more seconds.
Okay, if I could do a quick follow-up to each of you, if you could just do 1 minute on this. Both of you referenced sort of the commitments that you think the state needs to make. I was wondering if you had anything to say about fiscal policy and sort of economic justice and how that relates to taxes and how we address these issues. I think, Hoang, you're first.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And so, you know, I just wanted to be clear, though. John just called me out by name, and I want to address that, you know, this is a good opportunity to talk about, you know, people who straighten their hair. And that's why I support the Crown Act, which makes sure that people cannot be, you know, oppressed or be discriminated against for however that they hold their hair, which we know disproportionately affects people of color, especially Black and Black folks who, you know, wear different hairstyles. And so I'd like to make sure that, John, you know, I support people who can straighten their hair, and I support people who don't. And I want to be clear about that. So I'd love to also answer that other issue, which is around, you know, I would also say that, you know, really when we decide what matters, we can talk all day about what we value, but really where that shows up is in our budget, right? What we're going to spend money on. You can say that you value education, but when we know year after year that there isn't an investment in fully funding the educational systems, then we know that, you know, it doesn't mean much to say that you do. Or so many folks say that they care about disproportionality when it comes to the child welfare system, but then they don't support bills that would attack that disproportionality directly. Those are problems. So, you know, budgets are moral documents. People know this. That's something that we then must make very clear. It's been said time and time again in all discussions, right? Rena Moran is really prominently quoted for saying that. And I think that, I support her in that effort. And I really do think it's critical that then we take every single chunk, and we also make sure that we look at our budget and say, hey, any tax cut for big businesses, for oil companies, for folks that are benefiting from the extraction economy, we need to close those loopholes and put those towards places like the East Side, communities that are hurting, and reinvest that in places that need it the most. When it comes to the budget, those are things I want to be clear on, is that if I'm going to be fighting for St. Paul at the state capitol, then we better get those dollars back here on the East Side. And so one of the things also is I would like to see an increase in local government aid. Local government aid was cut drastically under Pawlenty, and it needs to be restored. So thank you so much.
John?
So that I'm clear, Clarence, my statement was any person of color can straighten their hair out and benefit from white privilege. What color are you? But back to the question. I have data right here in my hand. I do a lot of research. I have data right here in my hand that shows that Black children are being ripped out of their home at the highest rate in the state, not in Frogtown, not in Duluth, but right here on the East Side in my district has the highest rate of children being snatched out of their home. So when you talk about how the foster care system works for you, I challenge that, because it don't work for Black people. It don't work for my community. As a matter of fact, they take my Black children and send them all out there, all the way out to Worthington, and have them working on a farm somewhere. So I'm clear. So when it comes to finances and economic justice, the brother was the chair of jobs and economic development for 20-some years. And all due respect, jobs and economic development on the East Side sucks. And as I said before, and I think he does a good job of repeating what I say, our budget is a moral compass, and we can put whatever we want to put in this budget. Don't tell me you don't have money to make our schools some of the best schools when it comes to renewable energy. Don't tell me you don't have the money to help reform the criminal justice system so that it looks like criminal justice reform. Don't tell me you don't have the money to give us real affordable housing options, because the house is just not affordable here on the East Side. Don't tell us you don't have the money. Find it. And I'll work tirelessly every day. I'll take that extra phone call. I'll make that 12 a.m. email until we find it. I'll stay in my office overnight if I have to. That's the type of legislator you'll be seeing at the state capitol. Again, I hope they're ready for what's coming. Thank you.
Thank you. So for the next question, what action would you take on other state or local issues outside your role in the legislature? And John, you're first on this.
Hey, John, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh, yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there we go.
Hear me? Something's going on. I don't know if they can hear me or not.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, so outside of my role, I would work on this Hillcrest development, right? And I'm hoping to create jobs in the renewable energy industry, man. I'm telling you, a good friend of mine, Ed Owens, actually pulled me in as a member of the NAACP St. Paul. And his idea was to try to bring jobs to the East Side and to St. Paul when it came to air turbines and solar panels. These are jobs with working with East Side employment exchange to, I want to ensure that the East Siders are trained to do the jobs that simultaneously make life better on the East Side. And I'll say this again, with these jobs come good money. We're talking about some of these jobs are like $60,000 a year, right? You give a man an opportunity to make $60,000 a year, Black men will be fathers at home sleeping and taking care of their kids. A lot of the crime you see in my community would go away because they're too tired to be outside shooting guns at each other. Families will be back together. Part of ripping the Black man out of the family was to snatch his ability to make money for his family, right? And I'm speaking on this because I've been only one color all my life, and that's Black. And so I know lived experiences, right? I know broke is broke, and we do a good job of making broke look good, right? But those are issues definitely that I would work on as an East Sider. And then definitely like this XL energy, the integrated resource plan, the MPA relaxing the pollution permitting during the coronavirus. You know, they're talking about relaxing. They're talking about relaxing a policy that we've already put in place. At this time, we don't need y'all to relax that. So like I would work on that, but I definitely would work against any bill that infringed on native land without their permission. I stand with my native community and I will always stand with them. Any legislation that infringes on their land, I stand in solidarity against it. Any policy that makes sense for my community, I definitely want to support it. I definitely want to support my union workers because as a union member myself, I know how hard it is to work for a company and then every 2 years you have to negotiate and they're talking about giving you 2% as a union worker. I know how hard it is to get the proper protection you need to work in dangerous positions and conditions, you know, as a union worker. So I support my workers. And I'm talking about not just machinists, I'm talking about the nutrition service workers, the custodians, the building trades, the plumbers, the electricians, the window washers, the restaurant workers. These are my brothers and sisters. I stand in solidarity. I'm gonna always fight for their rights as a legislator and as a human being, right? I have a family, brothers and sisters. Listen, and I have a 9-year-old son. I don't want him standing up here talking about he's trying to fix the conditions that we're trying to fix right now. I want to fix him right now so that he can live in a society where we can say we fixed it for him. I'm definitely going to continue this fight regardless to the outcome of this election. And I'm going to continue to attack the problems and not attack the people at all, because people sometimes are the problems. And I can babble on and on and on, but I'm going to yield my time and give Hoang Murphy some time to answer the question.
All right. As a quick follow-up to that, so the positions are clear. What actions do you think you'd be able to take on these issues that you don't necessarily have direct control over, but you would have indirect power over? Like the kind of actions. Sorry, and you're muted again.
Can you repeat the question? You said, what kind of actions do you think I could take?
Yeah, so for like, there's the direct power in the legislature, but for these issues that you don't necessarily have direct power, but indirect, what actions do you think you'd be able to take?
Listen, I can't do anything like I want to do as a county commissioner. I can't do anything that I want to do as a city worker, right? The disparities that I see in my community happened at a state level, right? State legislators have actually voted on policies that harm, in House files, that harm my community, that harm my brothers and sisters. And like I said earlier, then they go back to Elk River and Rochester and Duluth and the Iron Range, not necessarily understanding the effect of how you just voted on certain issues, right? As a state legislator, I plan on working in coalitions with organizations just like this one right here to fight against bogus policies and procedures and stand up. I plan on having that inside-outside game as a politician and as a legislator, like I've always had. I'm not leaving my community. My campaign is simply people over politics. Every decision that I make is going to be geared by the people that are affected by the problems that I'm trying to fix. And I'm not babbling on and on and on about, oh, I can fix this and I can do that. That sounds like I'm not babbling on and on. I'm actually telling you exactly what I'm going to do as a state legislator. And I stand on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So Hoang, just to repeat the question, what action would you take on other state or local issues outside your role in the legislature?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, right? Because as legislators, we're in session 6 months at the time, 1 year, and then 3 months at the time, the rest of the year. And so the real question is, how are we fighting for justice? How are we fighting for freedom? 3/4 of the time, half of the time. And one of those clearest ways is I'm going to continue to build on my current work. I founded a nonprofit at age 26. I employ 2 other people right now, fighting for making sure that every kid gets a chance to be heard and make sure that we attack disparities through my nonprofit. that's something I plan to build on. We're passing legislation right now. I have a proven record on that. And if I'm able to be sent to the legislature, then I will be able to fight for that at the state legislature as well. Not only just influencing policy, but also creating it. I think that that's something that's absolutely fundamental. And I want to do that for the rest of the East Side, and making sure that everyone on the East Side gets a chance to go to the Capitol. Because I think it's a damn shame that every night here on the East Side, we can see the Capitol Dome lit up, but so few people feel like they can walk through those Capitol doors and walk up those steps and be heard. That must change. So, addressing some of those other issues, and part of that is, bringing folks to the East Side. So I am committed to doing civic engagement monthly, and making sure that we're listening to community and responding to me and being in relationship with our community members and pushing voter turnout. And I will repeat, because it's so important, that this is the worst voter turnout district in the entire state. That can change. And I would put it on anyone, whoever wins the seat. That is not enough to win this campaign. You must change the relationship that we have with power and voter turnout here. The East Side can be a voter turnout engine, and we can decide what happens for the rest of the state. We can build real political power here. And that is putting power in the hands of people of color and Indigenous folks in marginalized communities. Another issue that I'd really like to address and really speak on is the Hillcrest cleanup and development. This is the biggest opportunity we have in the last 25 and probably future 25 years to really make an impact around the environment and around jobs here. And although a lot of that has to happen at the city level in partnership with the Met Council, in partnership with the Port Authority and so many other entities, one clear way that as a state legislator I can help fight for this issue is protecting the Beaver Lake watershed. We can design this and build this with our values in mind, looking to the future, not just making do with the past. We can do that here. And part of that is regular civic engagement, making sure that, that the mercury that was dumped there is a state problem and the state should help pay for it. And making sure that we bring down those dollars to, buttress the work that's being done by the city council and all those other folks. And also fighting any relaxation of pollution laws. I think it's insane right now that people are trying to roll back environmental standards during a global pandemic. It is insane that, while folks are getting sick during a global pandemic, that folks are trying to make us sicker by reducing our air quality, making our water less safe, and doing fewer inspections on our food. I will pass any language and any legislation that prevents this from happening now and in the future, so that in future emergencies and disasters that legislators who are Republicans do not have the opportunity to roll back environmental protections to support industry and to support oil producers and to support oil business people. And finally, this may be out of the park idea, but one thing I also want to do is I want to show that we can be in solidarity with the rest of the state. That I reject this idea of a rural and urban divide. The need here on the East Side is just as great as the need up in Greater Minnesota. We need high-speed internet here, and we also need it in Greater Minnesota. And that's how you make difference in a body of 201 people. And so what I'd like to do is encourage folks I'm working with legislators in the Red River Valley and around Duluth to do a bus tour to make sure that folks from the East Side, because my goal as a campaign and as a person is to bring the East Side to the Capitol, but we're also going to bring the East Side to the rest of the state. So I thank you so much, and I appreciate your ability to answer these questions.
Thank you. For follow-up, can you speak to anything action you take, for instance, around the Excel IRP that's coming out and the budget on that's going to, or the plans for that going into the future?
Yeah.
And what specific actions you take on that?
Yeah. I think, I can't remember exactly who said it, but someone told me that we should be lucky to have a company like Excel here. That we compared to other power companies, we should count our lucky stars that we have Excel. But with all due respect, we can do better here in the state of Minnesota. But we do not have to make do with what is acceptable. Here in Minnesota, we can reject a policy of the status quo and demand better and greater environmental justice. So I support St. Paul 350 and I support Minnesota 350 in their efforts to say no more fracking, no more fossil fuels, no more extractive industries, that we here in partnership with Excel, that we here can show that environmental safety is going to be the best in not just the state, the best in the country, and not just in the country, but the best in the world. That Minnesota can lead the rest of the world in this production. And adding to that, we can also address that more deeply by also making sure that, Excel is held accountable to some of their energy projections. There have been plans to build a solar garden over on the east side for years. It's never been built. And yet it's in their reports as a solar project that they're going to invest in. I haven't seen that. We haven't seen the fruits of that here on the east side. If they're going to keep saying that they're doing it, then I'm going to try to hold them accountable to make sure that they actually do it. We can show here that Excel can be a leader, and I would try to work with them, and I would encourage them right now. So if you're Excel and you're listening to this, please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you and love to say how we can engage on this and do a better job to make sure that we can be a leader across the country when it comes to environmental stewardship, and that we can make sure that folks from the east side get heard and get their voices heard as part of this plan. That we're not seeing representatives from Excel coming out and knocking on doors and asking the community, what would you like to see in our new power plan? Right? What would you like to see next door to you? Because it's not going to be extractive industries. It's not going to be rail cars full of oil. It's going to be solar panels. It's going to be wind, and it's going to be water production. It's going to be energy that's clean, affordable, and accessible. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll have time for the closing statements from the candidates. John, I believe you are first.
Once again, this is John Thompson. I am running and I am your candidate for Minnesota House 67A. I'm actually running the campaign. I started this campaign definitely because of the work that I've been doing in the community to fight for justice and equality for brothers and sisters all over the state of Minnesota. As the vice chair of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee for Ramsey County, I work alongside John Choi with also trying to fight and find real justice reform options, right? As the vice chair of community mediators in Minnesota, I also bring mediation to the table to resolve a lot of issues all across the state, but also travel the world and I put on courageous conversations. My last conversation was called The Jury of Our Peers, because we've never seen an all-Black jury. We've never seen an all-Hmong jury. We've seen plenty of all-white juries all over the state of Minnesota and all over the United States, convicting brothers and sisters. And so criminal justice reform is something that I'm really passionate about, but also changing the conditions that exist in my community. So if you're serious about fighting the community, don't judge a man by what he says, judge him by what he does. And I repeat myself again, anybody can say they're a person of color and then straighten their hair out and walk in the building and benefit from the white privilege that's going on at the state capitol right now. I'm not that guy. I don't have that option. I didn't choose to be this skin color, but I'll continue to fight for every color. I'll continue to fight for every race. I'll continue to fight for gender equality. I'll continue to fight for age discrimination. I'll continue to fight for my Asian Hmong brothers and sisters, my Somali brothers and sisters, so that we all get our fair share of the pie. Because on the east side is a diverse community. And I definitely know that we can use our diversity as our strength when it comes to fixing a lot of the issues that we have here on the east side of St. Paul. You could definitely learn a lot more about my campaign by visiting my website, which is johnthompson67a.org, or just Google John Thompson and look at some of the work that I've done throughout the community, some of the organizational BS that goes on, some of the business as usual meetings that I've just stepped in and said, enough is enough. Judge me by what I do, not what I say. So if I get in this office and I don't answer my phone, show up to my office with 250 people in a bullhorn and call me a hypocrite. You know, everybody cares about the east side when it's time to run for elections. Everybody comes out of the woodwork and they're knocking on your doors and asking you to vote for them. Some of these people you ain't never heard of in your life, but I'm guaranteeing you know that I'm your brother. I've been on the east side fighting with my brothers and sisters. We got an organization right now on the east side called the East Side Heat Basketball Organization, where we're taking youth outside of the urban area and giving them other options, other ways to channel their anger. I can't lose another brother and sister out here on this east side. And so for me, this is a personal fight. I want the people at the state capitol to understand that enough is enough when it comes to cutting us out on the east side. Our roads are some of the most terrible roads on the east side, right? We don't own anything. Black home ownership is pretty much the worst in the state. Black businesses, pretty much the worst in the state. We want a piece of the pie. When it comes to Black and brown people, man, like it's time for us to get out here and ask for it. And I no longer can stand up here and hold a bullhorn and show up with people behind me. This is what after the bullhorn looks like. Somebody asked me to give them tangible answers and tangible solutions. Well, here I am today with a tangible answer, running to be the next state representative in District 67A. And I promise to be the man that I'm telling you I'm gonna be right now and bring you the same passion that you see right now. You know, people get this confused with anger. Well, if I'm angry, why aren't you as angry as I am? Because a lot of the disparities we see in this doggone state have been for far too long. Time is up. It's time to cut us in or cut it out. Please pick John Thompson as your next state representative, your first choice in District 67A. I love y'all. And now say this, people can spread hate all around the world. I say I love you to perfect strangers. Because if people can spread hate, I can spread love. And I'll end that with love. I love you.
All right, thank you. And Hoang?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone so much again for coming out. You know, it takes a lot, especially right now during this really difficult time, to come out and listen to candidates, still engage in the democratic process, and listen to issues and values. And I want you to reach out to the campaign at hoangmurphy.org, reach out to me personally at campaign@hoangmurphy.org. I would love to answer questions. If you heard something that you agree with, let me know. I would love to talk about it. Heard something you disagree with, let me know. I would love to be in conversation about it. And if you want to be a part of the campaign, please reach out. But also, I do want to make sure, and I do, you know, it would be remiss of me not to address it. But earlier, you know, the other person in the race just said, you know, asked the public and asked me, I can't but feel, what color am I? And I feel like, you know, right now during the COVID crisis, there's a lot of anti-Asian sentiment happening right now. And, you know, I reject that belief and I reject the idea that, you know, somehow dividing us makes us stronger. It doesn't. There is no us or them. There is only us. And that's what this global pandemic is teaching us and showing us. We are only as strong as our weakest neighbor. And I would implore every candidate in this race and, you know, in the state of Minnesota to avoid any language that is, you know, anti-Asian or that, you know, plays into colorism. I think that those are things that can be avoided. The clearest example of that, you know, when I entered foster care, I was 8 years old. I was 40 pounds underweight and I'd never been to school before. And I went in foster care with my one sibling, my half brother. And I remember going to these group homes and kids would, after lights out, would get into a circle and they would share the worst thing that ever happened to them. And I never played that game. I never played that game because I knew that if you played that game, you lost. If you tried to win a battle of what worst happened to you, that you actually lost. That's something that we need to avoid and something that we need to reject that notion of. There is no fighting for a bigger slice. There is only fighting for a bigger pie for all of us. And so I'd love to address environmental impacts. As a millennial, I am part of the generation that will inherit an earth riven by the horrors of climate change. This fight is personal. I will fight to ensure that we have a healthy Minnesota and a healthy earth for generations to come. People keep saying that we're destroying the earth, but with all due respect, I reject that notion. Humans are not so powerful that we can destroy the earth, but we can destroy it for humans to be on. And that's something that we must change and must shift. And as someone who's grown up on the East Side and in rural parts of the state, later after I was adopted at age 11 from the foster care system, I know what's at stake for all of us if we do not act in solidarity around climate change. And as a person of color, and if elected as the first person of Vietnamese descent to ever be elected to any public office in the state of Minnesota, I will stand and be uniquely positioned to leverage relationships, both in Greater Minnesota, within the POCI caucus, and within the Minnesota Asian Pacific caucus, members to push for common sense, you know, climate action and agriculture, on the environment, on energy, on issues relating to legacy and, you know, other impacts of our environment. And I want to just make sure that folks know that I am asking for your support, first choice, this Saturday for the next state representative from District 67A. And I know that this is a confusing process. And so it's okay to be confused. I'd love to use the remainder of my time to just address some of that. So you will be getting an email from the state DFL with a code on it that will be asking how to vote. is a ranked choice vote, so you can rank your choices. And I would appreciate if you would vote for me as your first choice. But also I'd like to address that if you ask for a mail ballot, you'll be getting a mail ballot and that will be sent to you. And you will have until May 4th to send that in to have your vote collected. And if you have not heard from the DFL or have not heard from the Senate District 67, please reach out. Reach out to our campaign again at campaign@hoangmurphy.org, and we will make sure that you get a ballot. And so, I would like to close on, my remarks earlier that I know that, I'm running, but I need your help. Together we can build real political power here on the East Side. Together we can build a state in which every kid succeeds. The East Side saved my life, and I have a debt to repay my community. And serving as your next state representative is a small way that I hope to repay it. So thank you so much, and I'd appreciate your first choice vote at the state convention this Saturday. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, both of the candidates. Mike, I don't know if you want to wrap things up on behalf of St. Paul 350, but appreciate both of you dealing with all of our technical difficulties. Of course, we were originally supposed to do this on Monday. Thank you to Carla Reilly, who has helped us work through so many of the technical difficulties and allowed us to live stream and record this event. I want to make sure that everyone knows that if you want to see this again, or if you have friends who missed it, it will live on both our Facebook page as a video, on the Eastside Freedom Library YouTube page, and I believe it will be on the 350 page as well. I will let them say a few more words about that, but please, I hope everyone will continue to be involved in this political process and be involved with the conversations that we have at the Eastside Freedom Library, be involved with St. Paul 350 and MN 350. It's really important. Mike?
Yes, I'd like to thank both the candidates for coming out. We greatly appreciate you attending this forum, and we definitely appreciate you bearing with our technical difficulties in getting this set up. Bore with a bunch of problems that we had, and appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming out again.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that does conclude our forum tonight. Thank you, everyone, for coming out, and thank you for your persistence in sticking with us in the multiple attempts in trying to get this out. Thank you again, and have a good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.